We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our family.
But then he turns around and says, we have to protect ourselves. Well, what does he mean by protect ourselves? Are Christians to have guns?
Hello friends, welcome to the YouTube channel today. I have David House from Saving Health Ministry on my channel today. Pastor David House, I will say from my experience listening to him, I thought very God-fearing man, loves the word. I can't deny his Christianity. He loves the truth. I don't agree with some of his sermons and some of his deliveries and interpretation on certain things. But for the most part, I think he's a nice guy. Some of you can argue differently. I like to see the positivity in people. I'm not the kind of guy who always looks for the negative. So that's not me. And this is not to say I don't sit at his feet, not in any way whatsoever. In today's video, he is speaking here about Andrew Henriques, and he is saying that he had a dream about Andrew Henriques. And I wanted to speak about that and examine the nature of his vision and what this is all about. Anyway, before we get to this video, make sure you like and subscribe to the page. Click the bell icon for more. It's going to get really interesting because we have to discuss what is being talked about here for a number of reasons. Now, David House began his prophecy by laying the foundation. He prayed. He quoted Genesis 37, verse 5, which is about Joseph who had dreams and was hated for it. So I'm guessing the application here will be by him sharing his dream, he might be hated for it by his fellow brethren. Genesis also, he also went to Job 33, verse 14. He spoke about that to verse 18. He spoke about how God will give dreams and visions in the night and so on. He also quoted Jeremiah 30, 23, 28. So if you have a dream, you need to tell somebody about it, right? You need to tell the individual. So now he's going to tell us what the dream is about. And this is what he saw in his dream. Let's listen to the dream and then let's talk about what he is actually saying. Whether or not this is of God inspired, I'm not necessarily sure. But he believes this dream about Andrew Henriques is from the Lord. And he believes Andrew Henriques is committing a sin because of this dream. So let's take a listen.
Into the dream itself. A very short dream, very quick dream. It says, in the dream, I was with Andrew Henriques and we were at his house. And he was showing me his handgun or his pistol. And later on, while riding in the car with him, I said to him, do your children know that you have this? And then the dream ended. In the days of Ellen White, God was revealing the secret sins of individuals in the church. Hence the reason we have the testimonies for the church.
Okay, so that's a very interesting dream. So the dream here is Andrew Henriques had a weapon, and then he went on to speak about the sin of Andrew Henriques for owning a weapon, according to what he saw in his dream. So let's see what else he's saying.
And God is doing the same thing in these last days via dreams. History always repeats itself.
So he did argue, by the way, that he's not a prophet. He doesn't believe that he has the gift of prophecy, but he gets dreams and visions from the Lord. These are his words. Whether you believe it or not, I don't necessarily know. I don't know. As far as for me, I'm kind of neutral when it comes to that. But nevertheless, that's what he believes. Okay, so my question now was, what exactly is the baseline for this dream? So he said something here that I thought was very interesting. He made reference to a video that he had done 3 years prior. And he linked it in a description, and I'm glad that he did. And I looked at that video. So I'm examining the nature of this man's work, and I'm finding something here. Number one, let me say this. I'm not here to defend Andrew Henriques so much so. Apart from the fact, I will say we need to be fair in everything that we say and do. I have criticized Andrew Henriques. At the same time, I do respect his ministry. I've criticized, you guys been in my channel, you know how I feel about this. It's just, I think some of his some of his deliveries are wrong and some of the ways that he approached the church, especially in the past. There's been a drastic change, of course. And I think he could be very harsh and very difficult to work with on certain issues. And I think there was a lack of grace in the way that he addressed many leaders in the church and, things that's going on in certain local churches. He managed to intertwine that with all conference leaders and pastors. He has condemned many people in the church in a very negative light. I had issues with that. This is not to say his ministry is not powerful. He's not doing a great work for the Lord. This is not to say the man is not consistent. This is not to say that he has been a light shining in a dark place. He has warned the church of apostasy. He has been very, very much active and consistent, proclaiming the three angels' messages, the signs of the times. You can't take away the activity and the work and the aggressiveness by which this man is working. You can't take that away from him. That is a fact, and that speaks for itself. I will never do that. But to say that because in a dream he owns a weapon, or to say he owns a weapon, therefore he's an apostasy, or maybe he has sinned against God, I am not very convinced of that. And this is not to say, and this is why we think we need to have the conversation here. Anyway, this is the foundation of his dream. Let's listen a little bit more to what the foundation is.
Jesus Christ. And we're living in a time, by the way, men, raise your hand. All the men, raise your hand. Raise your hand, men. All right. Thank you. Hands down. We're living in a time when God has stated he's our mighty fortress. He is our bulwark. Men, husbands, fathers, we have to protect ourselves.
Facts. I 100% agree. And he is speaking from the perspective of that event that took place in Haiti. I'm not sure if you guys heard about this. It happened about, I think, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, at least. Yeah, this minister was in the church. Yeah, 2021. So he was in a church and gunmen walked in doing the live stream. And if you see their face, you could tell they knew something was wrong. Watch this. Yeah. So the rest of the story was the man came in and actually kidnapped them. This is actually a very common practice. I'm from Haiti. David House is also from Haiti. So yes. So the gunman came with his gun and took captives the pastor and three other people with him. With an AK-47 in his hands. The 4 church members were released 72 hours later on April 4th. And I think money had to be paid for this. This wasn't just as black and white as you guys might think. These guys, when they capture you, they want to get paid. So I do have a number of questions to ask when it comes to this. And David House went on to criticize Andrew Henriques' appeal for men to protect their family, especially in the times when there's stuff like this going on even in churches. So listen to his criticism.
Now, these statements are being made in response to what took place in Haiti when the 4 SDA members were taken captive by the armed gunmen who came into the church service in the midst of their live stream and took them captive. That's where the context of these statements are coming from. And understand that I agree with him when he says that we should be vigilant and alert concerning our surroundings. Absolutely. We should be very much aware as to what is happening where we are, no matter where we are, whether at the grocery store or whether sitting in church. We should be very much alert to what is taking place. But the contradiction by first stating our only safety is in Jesus. Again, I agree with that statement, but then he turns around and says, we have to protect ourselves. Well, what does he mean by protect ourselves? Are Christians to have guns and arm themselves with firearms?
So his criticism here is very clear. Okay, so Andrew Henriques can, and we should as Christian, believe Christ is our protector. He's saying there's a contradiction. If you believe Christ is your protector, you should not own a weapon. All right, there's something wrong with this. Christ is my protector. I should not lock up my car doors. Christ is my protector. I should not close the windows of my house. Christ is my protector. I should not have a pen for my credit card so that nobody can hack it. Christ is my protector. I want you to think about the argument here. And I have all respect for David House. David House, this is a serious mistake you're making here. It sounds eloquent, it sounds truthful, but it's not. Because Jesus is your protector doesn't necessarily mean you can protect your families from violence. Doesn't necessarily mean if you own a weapon as a Christian, you are a bad and evil man. I don't agree with that. I mean, I'm not advocating for weapons. I'm not saying you have to own one. You can if you want to. You have the right in this country to do so. And I'm going to show you why I think David Gates is wrong. And now I have to question the validity of that dream. Like, how could you get a dream from God that contradicts just common sense, right? It's not even reality. It's just common sense. If Andrew Henriques owns a weapon, that's his business. I don't really care. As a matter of fact, if I were Andrew Henriques and preaching the way that he's been, I probably would own a weapon too. Have you heard this man's sermon lately? He's been sounding the alarm. He's been saying things. I don't agree with everything that he says. I think sometimes he goes too far, and I've said this before. But for the most part, he's been on point. He's been shining the light in the dark places of our world and even in the church. So you can't take that away from him. So it wouldn't shock me that Andrew Henriques might be getting death threats. It wouldn't shock me that people are coming to his church spying on the guy. Do you understand the nature of our society and the condition and how hostile things have been today? Today's society and 20 years ago, it's not the same thing, buddy. It's a whole different world. And we're going to talk about this. And I want to come back before I say some more about this matter. I don't need to make this any longer than it needs to be. All right. So Christianity today, and I'm not here trying to make an argument so much for this. All I'm simply saying is you need to be very thoughtful as Christians when it comes to this matter, when it comes to weapons and so on. And I think being critical of a person who owns one is not right. The first thing I want to say is this. Christianity Today had this article, Should Christians Own Guns for Self-Defense? A global Snapchat. I'm going to come back to this. Liberty Magazine also spoke about this as well. They had a view. So here's a fact. Here's a fact, right? Average deaths in shooting rampage when stopped by police, we're talking about 14.3. So average deaths in shooting rampage when spotted by civilians is 2.3. And what the story is showing is people are saving their lives and protecting their neighborhood much faster and quicker and stopping the violence from happening by owning a weapon. That's what they're finding out. So more Americans are becoming guns owners for personal protection, and that's a good thing, people believe. Brad Bar News says more Americans arm themselves, arms for self-defense than ever before. Now, I won't go as far to say this, okay? Amazing Word Ministries has referred to David as a prophet of doom. I wouldn't go as far to say this of him. I don't think he's a prophet. He doesn't claim to be a prophet because he's getting dreams and vision from God, which is very common, which is very biblical. Doesn't necessarily mean he's a prophet. Okay, so that's okay. And for me to criticize him in that way, I won't do that. Here's the thing. The Second Amendment, this is what it says. And again, this is a right for every American. So you don't have to practice it. You don't have to believe in it. Right? But just know if a person chooses to do it, you can't condemn them, right? A regulated militia. By the way, the word militia here are the people who owns the weapon. These are Americans. Being necessary to the security of the free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is written in the as part of the amendments in this country. There's a number of reasons for it. When you actually study furthermore, is because in every nations before there's a takeover, and this is the argument from the gun lobbyists, okay? The people who believe owning weapons is fine. And I'll be honest with you, just to side note, I don't own a weapon. I don't own one. So just letting you know, I don't own one, but I'm not against people who do. Okay, so doesn't mean I will never own one. All I simply say is I don't think this is, I'm not making an argument here because I'm a gun owner and so on. That's not really what it is. All I'm simply saying is the dream and just common sense in reality doesn't seem to be parallel very well. So the militia here are the people of the country. They have the right to protect themselves by law. So Christianity Today made a number of arguments, and I'm going to come back to Christianity Today. And I want you to notice these facts. These facts really caught my attention. So the person we're about to listen to is Amy Swayer. She was speaking to the House of Judiciary, and she made this argument to the House, and it was mind-blowing on the facts that was being laid here. And I think very people who criticize guns and everything else, you actually need to do a little bit of research on this matter and see what the people are really saying and what the numbers are, and check out the stats before you think everything about a weapon is evil, right? And how do we coincide that as a Christian? And that is yet to be answered. So let's look at this.
Ranking Member Collins and distinguished members of Congress. My name is Amy Swearer, and I am the Senior Legal Policy Analyst at the Heritage Foundation's Ed Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Just as doctors can only recommend an effective treatment plan if they first form a correct diagnosis based on accurate assessment of the symptoms, policy analysts and policy makers must have an accurate understanding of the societal problems they are seeking to combat. Unfortunately, too many policymakers appear completely uninformed about basic factual realities related to guns and gun violence. Don't misunderstand me. We all want safer communities, but the characteristics distinguishing so-called assault weapons from non-assault weapons are not factors like caliber, lethality, or rate of fire. Proposals to ban scary-looking features like barrel shrouds or pistol grips are, for all intents and purposes, proposals to force law-abiding citizens to own guns that are harder for them to handle, harder to fire accurately, and more likely to cause them injuries, even when they are being used for lawful purposes. Moreover, semi-automatic rifles are not a meaningful driving factor behind rates of gun violence. 2/3 of gun deaths in this country are suicides, where the type of firearm is essentially irrelevant. With respect to gun crimes, over 90% are committed with handguns. Rifles of any kind are definitively used in only 3 to 4% of gun homicides every year, and an American citizen is 4 times as likely to be stabbed to death than they are to be shot to death with a rifle of any kind. Despite frequent claims that semi-automatic rifles are the weapon of choice for mass public shooters, in the last decade, over half of these shootings have been carried out with handguns alone. On the other hand, semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 are so well suited for defensive action against threats in a civilian context that the Department of Homeland Security quite literally designates them as personal defense weapons for law enforcement officers. It is little wonder, then, that millions of law-abiding citizens in this country also choose these types of semi-automatic rifles as their own personal defense weapons. Far from needing to be protected from these rifles, law-abiding Americans benefit when they are allowed to defend themselves with them, particularly in situations where they are outnumbered. Just last week, a homeowner in Rockdale County, Georgia, relied on his scary-looking semi-automatic assault weapon to defend himself against 3 masked teens armed with at least 1 handgun who tried to rob him and other residents in their own front yard. Ironically, the rifle deemed an assault weapon by many in this room was used defensively to protect innocent people against assault, while the perpetrators used a non-assault weapon offensively to commit actual assault. Importantly, some of the most famous examples of the defensive use of assault weapons by civilians come from scenarios where the government has been either unable or unwilling to defend entire communities from large-scale civil unrest. During the 1992 LA riots, for example, law enforcement was nowhere to be found as hundreds of looters ransacked Koreatown. Ordinary store owners like Richard Ree and his employees took it upon themselves to defend their livelihoods from lawlessness, using, in many cases, semi-automatic rifles. Similar stories emerged during the civil unrest in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. There are some here today who still genuinely don't understand why or how anyone would need such scary-looking rifles for purposes other than mass murder. And so I have permission from my mother to explain it to you by partially embarrassing her. My mother did not grow up with firearms, and they will never be her favorite thing in the world. In fact, she'd never handled a firearm until I took her to the range for the first time several years ago. Now, I love my mother, but like every other novice with a handgun, she was quite bad. I mean, she struggled to hit a stationary target from 6 yards out under ideal conditions. And then she picked up an AR-15. And I watched my mother put a fist-sized grouping of lead in the center mass of a target from 20 yards out. That is why law-abiding citizens buy millions of these firearms. When accuracy and stopping power matter, they are simply better. Americans use firearms to defend themselves between 500,000 and 2 million times every year. God forbid that my mother is ever faced with a scenario where she has to stop a threat to her life. But if she is, I hope politicians protected by professional armed security didn't strip her of the right to use the firearm she can handle most competently. Frankly, I hope she has in her hands the scariest looking assault weapon she can find, so that we can both be confident in her ability to end the threat. Thank you.
Anyway, she's arguing for AR-15 here. We get that, but the facts that she was laying out about weapons are actually very interesting. Okay, so this is something that Christians have to think about, pray about, talk about, because it's not going to go away. Yes, I agree with David House on this factor. The Lord is our refuge and strength of every help in trouble. The Bible tells us in Psalms 49 that the Lord is our refuge. As a matter of fact, Psalm 46, we're going to read verse 1 here, and I want to kind of bring this video to an end. Yeah, God is our refuge and strength, a very help in trouble. We know that to be true. I think when it comes to a weapon thing, owning guns, it's like, to each his own. You know what I'm saying? It really is one of those matters, like I will say, follow your conscience, follow your personal conviction. I don't think we should be condemning people who owns one, and we shouldn't criticize people who don't. I think as a father, I myself, I got to protect my family from all kind of stuff. I don't own a weapon, but this doesn't mean I never would. Because when I look at the condition of our society today, I said, yeah, maybe it's time because I'm so serious. So I wouldn't call him a false prophet in any way, but certainly I will question the dream. So according to Christianity today, this is the argument, right? And the argument that they're making is this: Christians are called to be vanguards for peace and peacemakers in a world that is full of violence and evil. The contrast between what we are called to represent and the reality of our world today expose a challenge to owning a weapon for self-defense and other non-violent purposes. I personally believe that it is right for a Christian to own a weapon for the purpose of self-defense. He went on to say, the level of increased violence in our communities has assumed worrisome dimensions today. The recklessness with which innocent lives are killed on a daily basis by individuals with no conscience leaves question in the hearts of many Christians on the ethical challenges of gun ownership. However, a look at the Bible offers some insights regarding the practice that informs this issue today. There's another interesting article, which I'm not going to have time to get into. It is done. Heritage Foundation has a good one. I can link it in the description, where it talks about facts on gun violence and everything else. Self-defense and Christians by Liberty Magazine. And they've laid a number of scriptures here for arguments as well. I don't have time to get into this. We need to end this video. Yes, on one side of the issue is this: we got to trust the Lord to be our protector. But to say a person cannot protect himself, defend himself from violence, especially in a time when mental health is out of control. Case in point, you're at home with your children. You did nothing to anybody. This is not the time of trouble. We're not running because of National Sunday law. We're not being persecuted for our faith. That's not what's going on here. But just a mental health individual decided to come and burst into your home and wants to take out your family and your children. Do you think owning a weapon might be a good means to deter that from happening? You think about that, right? And case in point, person comes to the church, which has happened several times before, and they just decide that I'm gonna just murder people, right? And it happens all the time. Anyway, we got some serious facts here I'm gonna link these articles so that you can look at them. But if the person comes to the church and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, which can happen, I'm saying the Lord has been a protector to our people, to the church for a while. But this is not to say there are not churches where men still were able to come in and do damage. We have stories in history to tell us that this has been the case. There's also been stories of either a deacon or a minister who had a weapon who was able to deter the threat before any of the members were put to death. Would you say these people were wrong for stopping a mental health individual from hurting God's people? So how is it, if you say it's not wrong? I don't think you're saying it's wrong. If you say it's not wrong, so what's up with the dream? What's up with the dream? So I think people people are gonna question the validity of these dreams if they are of God at all.
Leadeth into captivity, shall go into captivity.
These scriptures do not. I understand these are prophetic, but I understand what you're trying to say. But it's not even. Anyway, much more could be said. I think something about this dream is not right. And even though I'm not here to defend Henriques on everything that he does and says, I don't think it's is sinning if he does own a weapon. Let's just say he does. If he does, fine. Where is the sin? Where is the great evil? And I think as Christians, we do have to think about that, have the conversation and pray about it. And I can honestly tell you, you probably don't know this, I think from talking to a few Seventh-day Adventists, more than half of them own a weapon, just to let you know. Side note. So we don't have to go into the evangelicals. We don't have to go into the right wings to speak about it. I'm telling you, many Seventh-day Adventists carry. So does that mean they are not God's people anymore? Does that mean they no longer believe the three angels' messages? Does that mean they're not Christians? And by the way, I did some research. The spirit of prophecy has nothing to say about this. It speaks about firearms, but just about the event in itself. It never really tells you whether it's okay to own a weapon or not to own one. So Ellen White is silent. And I think when it comes to silence, it is left to you, your God, and your personal conviction on what to do. You don't want to own a weapon. You think we should own one? That's you. If you think we should own one to protect yourself and to be the man that God has called you to be, like Henriques says, you should protect your family from violence as a man. Therefore, make up your mind. That is up to you, your relationship with the Lord. Discuss the matter with your family. Is it a sin to own a weapon? I don't think so. So therefore, I have a problem with this dream. I have a huge problem with this dream, David House. Something is wrong here. Anyway, much more could be said. Link in the description below. Like and subscribe to the page. Click the bell icon for more. A lot more could be said, but I think it's best we end this video. Share your thought and perspective with me. Where do you stand when it comes to this discussion? How do you feel about David House? Would you call him a false prophet of doom? I don't. But I think there's something else going on. I don't know what it is, but I don't think that dream was actually biblically balanced. Much more could be said. Share your thought and perspective with me. Link in the description below. Check out our merch. Support the channel that way. Happy Sabbath for those of you who are watching tonight. Have a good one. Bye.